You want to get some information on some YouTube channels, like let's say the number of subscribers this channel has, and you want to do that instantly and automated. Well, you can use Google Apps Script for that. I'm Chanel Greco from Saperis, and in this video, I'll show you how you can automatically retrieve information from Google YouTube channels, from YouTube channels. Do me a favor and subscribe to this channel, because I post videos about how you can automate Google apps like YouTube, Gmail, Google Sheets by writing some lines of code with Google Apps Script, and I wouldn't want you to miss out on those videos. We're in a Google Sheets document, and in our first column we have the names of the channels, in this case 4 channels, from which we want to go and automatically get some statistics, some information. And you might notice the first thing that looks a bit weird or a bit strange is that we have no spaces in between the parts of the channel name. Okay, so this is crucial that you get that right. And where we're actually going to be writing our code is in the script editor. To access that, we click on Tools and then on Script Editor. Oh, and by the way, before we get started with writing our code, please do subscribe to this channel, okay? Just so that you don't forget. So the first thing we'll do is, let's save this project to YouTube Automation. You're actually, I mean, the naming here, it's up to you, whatever you feel comfortable with. And we're going to name our first function retrieve channel stats. Okay. And the first information, maybe even the most crucial information, will be the channel name. And we're also going to pass in the spreadsheet information. So what I'm writing now, I'm first writing the separate function that we'll be using to actually access the YouTube API. And then the second function we'll be writing will be the one to get the data from a spreadsheet. So the spreadsheet function is going to call our retrieve channel stats function. Okay, so we're going to create a variable of response. And this is the YouTube channels dot list, and the parameters we have to pass in our snippet, content details, and statistics. There you go. And then, oops, there you go. We'll want to access the channel by the username, so by the channel name, and that we do like so. For user name, channel name. Okay, that should do the trick. We'll get that response, and once we receive that response, we'll save it to the variable channel info response.items. There you go. So we're going to get a response from the YouTube channel, and that will have a property items, which, as you can see here, is an array, and we'll want to access the first position, so index 0 of this array, to be able to read that information. And the next thing we'll do is we'll create a data row where we'll actually populate an extra array, which will then write a new row in our spreadsheet. And the data we want to get is, first of all, the channel name, then the channel info.snippet.pub published. Publish that, and you know what? Let me just go and copy this so that I don't always have to type it out. I should paste it like so. Statistics.view count, and then channel info.statistics dot comment count, comma. Now I'll go to the new line, and let me be a bit more lazy. There you go. Subscriber count. By the way, I keep on tripping over that word subscriber and subscribe. I think it's so tongue twisting, but maybe that's just me. Video count. Okay, so then that will be our data row, and the last thing we'll want to do is say spreadsheet.append row, and we'll pass in the data row, which is this. So whatever is saved in this variable will then be appended to our spreadsheet. Okay, so this is only one half of the code. This is the part that will actually communicate with the YouTube API, retrieve the information we're interested in, and then save it or write it to our spreadsheet. But now we need to write a method that actually gets the names from the channels that we have in our spreadsheet and sends it through this function that we just wrote here. And this function I will be naming get channel names. Now keep in mind, this is just one possibility of how you can retrieve this information. I just prefer to have a function that gets the information from the spreadsheet and then calls the function that gets the YouTube data via API, but you could do this differently. I mean, that's the wonderful thing about coding. There's many ways to get to your solutions. So let's first get our sheet, spreadsheet app dot, and we'll get the active spreadsheet. There you go. Oops. And once we have that, we'll get our, what I dubbed the last row, dot get last row. And you'll see in a minute why we're doing that. And then we'll say get the range. We're using our sheet object, and we use the get range method. And then we're going to use the backticks. There you go. Like so. A2, and then a $. And now we want to use the value of whatever is saved in our last row variable that we just created. There you go. And once we have that, we say save the channel names in the variable called channel names, range dot get values. And that's going to give us an array, a two-dimensional array. And I decided on clearing our spreadsheet. So I'll explain, I'll dive into that in a minute. We're gonna loop over. There you go. Oops, that's wrong. I'm not going to type this out. I'm going to copy this because this is the function we just created before. And we're going to pass it the channel names index and index of 0 as well as the sheet. there you go. So far so good. I believe very strongly that when you're starting out to learn how to code, or maybe also learning a new programming language, that it's very important to actually understand what you're learning from tutorials, so that you don't just go ahead and copy paste or copy what you see me writing, but that you actually understand what we're doing here, what the script that I created and am sharing with you is doing. So for that, let's deep dive into this automation script. Now, let's start down here at Get Channel Names. We're getting our active spreadsheet, which is this spreadsheet here, and we're getting our last row, which would be here, number 5. And then at line 17, we're saying get range, and here we're using what is called string interpolation. So we're combining a normal string. This is the A2 is down here, and we want the last row, which will be 5. So we'll be getting A2 until A5. That's our active, that's the range that we're interested in. So this is string interpolation, and last row here will contain the value of 5, and that's the information we retrieved here with get last row. So we're combining this information to actually identify the last row that contains a value. That's important to understand. So get last row, this method here in Google Spreadsheet, gives me back the number of the row that has, or the number of the last row that contains some kind of value. And so when once we have our range, we're going to say, give me the values of whatever is in that range, and that will be these 4 channel names, and it will save it in the variable of channel names, and then we're clearing the range. So what we're then doing is we're wiping our range here, we're wiping this out so that we can then override it with with the statistics that we're getting from YouTube. Now this is just something I decided on doing just to keep this code nice and short and beginner friendly. You could of course also go ahead and identify, so okay, where is this information, then offset the writing, but as I said, I wanted to keep this code short, so that's why we're just clearing out the whole range of the channel names. And what we then have to do is we have to loop over our channel names, because what we get back is something like this. So imagine that channel names contains an array. And within that, we have an array of, let's say, women tech makers, and another array of Google developers, and so on and so forth. So that's what we get, or that's the value we have in our channel names. And we loop over this array. Array in programming is, as you see here, is an object that is kind of like a list. So it contains information one after each other, separated by a comma. So we're looping over this, and we're saying for every time we loop, give me back, so this is what we're using to loop, give me back the 0th position. So this would be, in the first loop, it would be women tech makers, in the second loop, Google developers, and so on and so forth. And it uses that string, that women tech makers, to call this function, retrieve channel stats, which is up here, retrieve channel stats. There you go. So this channel names here, which in the first loop will be women tech makers, will be the channel name, the parameter that we need to call our second function. And spreadsheet will be sheet. And what is sheet? Well, it's our active spreadsheet. So this here. And here in response in the variable, we see that we're calling the YouTube API. And this here also, I mean, this is not something I invented on my own. I checked the YouTube API documentation in order to find out how this request has to look so that I actually get data from the API. And that's why I know that I have to write snippet, content details, and statistics here. And I'm using the channel name. So this here, for example, the Women Tech Makers. And that means that I'm accessing the API by what is called the for username. That's what will be passed in there. And I will get back a response, and it will have a property of items. And again, it's an array. That's why I'm accessing it like so. And in that array, I'll have information of published at, view count, comment count, subscriber count, and video count. And I'll take all that information from this one channel and I'll create a new array. That's why you see the square brackets. And I'll save it into the variable of data row. And then my very last step is to take my active spreadsheet and append this data row to it. So it will go ahead and write a new row. And keep in mind, we're iterating over this array. So it will do this for every single channel name that we provided here. Okay, so let me go ahead and delete that. Make sure to save our script. And what we want to run now is our get channel names, because that afterwards will call the retrieve channel stats. So it's the get channel names, and we can either run it here or we'll just click here on the arrow. And now it's asking me for permission, which we grant, of course. Jane example, otherwise the script won't work. Now it's running. YouTube is not defined. We have an error. Okay, the reason is for the YouTube API to work, we have to do something extra. We have to click on resources and then on advanced Google services. And okay. And how do we do that? We have to first accept this to Google Cloud Platform. Go ahead, agree and continue. So this might also pop up in your case, in case that you haven't accepted these terms yet. So let's try it again. Advanced Google Services. There you go. And by the way, these are all advanced Google services you can use that provide you with an API which give you a ton of possibility of cool things you can do with a couple of lines of Google Apps Script. I'll be providing more videos about that in the future. Okay, so the YouTube data API has to be on. Okay. Now let's run this again. We grant permission, allow. It's doing something, cannot read property 0 of undefined on line number 4. Okay. You know what that means? It's time for debugging. Okay, so I ran it again and it worked like a charm. So maybe I was too fast with executing it and somehow the terms and conditions weren't accepted yet, or I don't know. But in anyhow, I would like to show you something extra, maybe a little bonus. I went back and I made sure that we have our channel names again, and I'll show you what I actually do when something doesn't work. I run my code in the debugging modus. So let's say we want to see what happens here. We just click here on number 4, and then we click on the little bug. what this does is it starts reading our code, it starts executing our code, and it stops here on this line. And this is the information of the variables, the local and the global variables we have. The one we're interested in right now is response. So now I'm checking what I actually have saved in the variable of response. That spreadsheet, here you go, response, okay? So there's a lot going on here, and what really interests me is items, because that's what I'm accessing here. So I have response.items, and here in position 0, and this is all the information you see back here of our YouTube channel. Let's see, do we have, we have statistics. So it's kind of like a tree that you can open up. We have statistics, and then here we have, I have to make this a bit bigger. There you go. For example, our video count, which we're accessing there. And I can go step by step forward in this function. And now it's doing, so it did that, now it's doing this. Now it's appending the row. Look what happens. There you go. So it deleted the other things, but that's absolutely okay because we kind of like have that in memory. And then I'll iterate over the next channel. Okay, so lastly, I just want to show you how it actually works from A to Z. So we wrote our two functions, and now we're going to run it. So in live mode, no debugging mode. And while I was talking, you see over here, it wrote the information. So it accessed the API from YouTube, and it actually got this information. So that's how you can automate getting information from any given YouTube channel by using the YouTube data API and some codes, some lines of code with Google Apps Script. If you have questions to this tutorial or how to access the YouTube API in general or anything else concerning Google Apps Script, go ahead and leave me a comment below and I'll be happy to get back to you.